The night my father told me I was nothing. I remember the exact moment my father broke me, not with his hands. No, he never needed to raise his voice or lift a finger to destroy something. He did it with words, with that cold, calculated look in his eyes, the one that said he'd already decided my worth before I'd even had a chance to prove it. I was 18, standing in his penthouse office, the kind of place where the air itself smelled like money, thick mahogany desks, floor to ceiling views of the city skyline, the kind of wealth that didn't just whisper power, it screamed it. And there he was, leaning back in his leather chair, swirling a glass of whiskey that probably cost more than my entire savings. When he said the words that would haunt me for years, "You'll never make it without my money." I can still feel the weight of that sentence pressing down on my chest, like someone had just dropped a slab of concrete onto my ribs. My father wasn't just a man, he was a legend in luxury real estate. The kind of man who built empires with a phone call, who bent markets to his will, who made other powerful men nervous just by walking into a room. And in his eyes, I was nothing. Not an heir, not even a disappointment. Just irrelevant. "You don't have the instinct for this," he'd said, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. Like I was a bad investment he was cutting his losses on. "You're soft. You think with your heart, not your head. And in this world, that'll get you crushed." He didn't just cut me off. That would have been too merciful. No, he made sure I understood the depth of his disbelief. No college tuition, no safety net, no family dinner invitations where I'd have to listen to his friends pity me. He even told our relatives I'd chosen to fail on my own, like my existence was some kind of embarrassment he needed to distance himself from. I'll never forget the way my mother looked at me that night, her eyes wet with unshed tears, her silence louder than any apology. She knew, they all knew. In that house, in that world, I was already a ghost. But here's the thing about being told you're nothing. It forces you to ask yourself, what if I'm everything? That night, curled up on the floor of my tiny rented room, with nothing but a half-packed suitcase and a burning hole where my pride used to be, I made a promise to myself. If my father wanted to see me crawl, fine. But I wouldn't be crawling back to him. I'd crawl through fire, through failure, through every damn obstacle he thought would break me, until I was standing taller than he ever imagined. And when he finally looked up, he wouldn't see his little girl anymore. He'd see the woman who built her own empire from the ashes of his doubt. So tell me, have you ever been told you weren't enough? That you didn't have what it takes? Hold on to that feeling. Let it burn. Because the people who underestimate you, they're not just wrong. They're the ones who'll be watching years later when you walk into a room they used to own, and the name on the door isn't theirs anymore. It's yours. Here's the raw, unfiltered truth about the night my father looked me in the eye and told me I'd never be enough. I remember the weight of his office door clicking shut behind me, the thick mahogany, the scent of aged leather, and his cologne, the kind that cost more than my entire savings at the time. He didn't even look up from his desk when I walked in, just signed another check, slid it into an envelope, and finally leaned back in his chair with that smirk, the one that said this conversation is already over before it begins. "You want to talk about college?" His voice was smooth, the kind of calm that comes when you're used to holding all the power. "Let me save you the embarrassment, Princesa. You think those professors will pat your head and call you brilliant. Just because you're my daughter, out there, you're nothing. No last name to hide behind, no trust fund to catch you when you fall." He tapped his modeling pen against the desk, each click like a nail in my coffin. "You don't have the stomach for business. You're too soft, too emotional." The way he said it, like it was a diagnosis, something incurable, made my hands shake. but I clenched them into fists behind my back. I'll prove you wrong, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He laughed. Actually laughed. With what? That part-time job at the cafe? The tips you save like they're gold coins? He stood up, looming over me, and for the first time, I saw him not as my father, but as what he really was. A man who'd built an empire by crushing people who dared to hope. You think ambition is enough? Honey, I've seen 1,000 hungry kids with fire in their eyes. Most of them burn out before they even get close. He reached into his drawer, pulled out a stack of bills, and held them just out of my reach. This is the only language the world understands. And you don't speak it. Something in me snapped. Not tears, not then. A white-hot rage so sharp it stole my breath. Because he was right about one thing, I was emotional. But he mistook my heart for weakness. He thought my tears meant I'd break. He didn't realize that every word he spat at me was kindling, and that night he lit a fire inside me that would never go out. I left his office without the money, without his blessing, but I took something far more dangerous. A promise to myself. If he wanted to bet against me, fine. I'd make sure that every boardroom he ever walked into again would have my name on the door. And here's what I need you to hear. Because this isn't just my story, it's yours too. The people who dismiss you, they're not your judges, they're your fuel. That condescending laugh, that you'll never make it, it's not a death sentence. It's the first brick in the foundation of the life you're about to build. So ask yourself, what's the empire they said you couldn't have? Now go take it. The night my father declared my failure to the world, I'll never forget the way the room went silent. It was a Thursday, one of those evenings when my family gathered under the pretense of unity, though we all knew the real purpose was to witness my public unraveling. My father stood at the head of the table, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, his words sharp as the knife he was twisting into my ribs. She's made her choice, he announced, like a judge delivering a verdict. No more money, no more favors. If she wants to prove she's more than my name, let her do it without a cent of mine. The clink of silverware stopped. My mother's breath hitched. My brothers avoided my eyes. And just like that, I wasn't just a disappointment. I was a spectacle. The worst part wasn't his cruelty. It was the way they believed him. My aunt, the one who'd once slipped me $20 bills when she thought no one was looking, now nodded solemnly, as if my father's decree was divine truth. My cousin, who'd bragged about my debate trophies just months before, suddenly had nothing to say. Even the house staff, who'd known me since I was a child, averted their gazes when I walked past. That night I learned the weight of communal judgment, how quickly love curdles into pity, how easily respect evaporates when the powerful declare you unworthy. I sat there, my hands trembling under the table, my face burning not with shame, but with something far more dangerous. By morning I'd made my decision. I would go to college. Not because I needed a degree to prove myself, that was too small a victory. No, I needed the struggle. I needed to stare down the barrel of every no, every closed door, every sneer from people who thought they knew my limits. I enrolled using loans, scholarships, and the stubborn refusal to let my father's prophecy become my reality. That first semester I worked 2 jobs, waitressing until my feet bled and tutoring wealthy kids who'd never known the sting of being called not enough. There were nights I cried in the library bathroom, my bank account in the red, my pride in tatters, but every time I wanted to quit, I'd remember the look on my father's face that night, the smug certainty that I'd break. And that memory, it became my fuel. Here's the truth, no one tells you about hitting rock bottom. It's loud. The voices in your head scream that you're foolish, that you should have taken the easy path, that the world wasn't built for people like you. But beneath that noise, there's another sound, a quieter, fiercer rhythm. It's the beat of your own heart, insisting you're still alive, still fighting, still capable. That night, my father didn't just cut me off, he lit a fire under me. And if you're listening to this right now, feeling the weight of someone else's doubts pressing down on your chest, I need you to hear me. Their limited imagination is not your destiny. The moment they declare your failure, that's not your ending, that's your beginning. So what's it going to be? Will you let their words bury you, or will you build an empire from the dirt they said you'd never rise above? Choose, then prove them wrong. Here's the script for Chapter 04, crafted to match your voice profile with precision. College wasn't just a classroom for me, it was a battleground. I remember the first semester, standing in that financial aid office, my hands trembling as I signed the loan papers. The weight of my father's words still pressed on my chest. You'll be back, but I refused to let them define me. So I took on 3 jobs, waitressing at a diner before dawn, tutoring in the afternoons, and stocking shelves at a grocery store until midnight. My schedule was a brutal puzzle, but every shift was a defiant step away from his prophecy. There were nights I'd sit in my car between jobs, too exhausted to cry, staring at my textbooks under the dim glow of a parking lot lamp. One winter, I got pneumonia but couldn't afford the copay. I studied through the fever, my notes blurred by tears because failing wasn't an option. The humiliation of asking for extensions, of professors pitying the girl who worked too much, stung, but I turned that shame into fuel. I wasn't just studying for a degree, I was building an armor. The breaking point came during finals week. My boss at the diner threatened to fire me if I missed another shift, but my economics exam was the next morning. I stood there, apron still tied around my waist, and told him, "Fire me. I'll find another job. But I'm not failing this test." He laughed. Until I aced it. That moment taught me something my father never could. Pressure isn't a burden, it's a forge. The heavier the weight, the stronger you become. I graduated magna cum laude, not because I was the smartest, but because I was the most stubborn. Every sleepless night, every no from a scholarship committee, every side eye from classmates who whispered about my thrift store clothes, it all sharpened me. And here's the truth I want you to hear. Your struggles aren't roadblocks, they're the raw material of your legacy. Maybe you're in your car right now, exhausted, wondering if it's worth it. Maybe someone told you you'd never make it. But look at me, I was that girl. And now, I'm the one signing the checks. So tell me, what's the fire you're going to build from your ashes? Here's the raw, unfiltered truth about my first steps into the real world, where the lessons weren't taught in classrooms, but in the bruises of rejection and the quiet humiliation of closed doors. The day I graduated, diploma clutched in my trembling hands, I thought I was ready. I had scraped through college on ramen and 4 hours of sleep, waiting tables until my feet bled, tutoring rich kids who flaunted trust funds while I counted my tips. I had proven I could survive without my father's name or his money. But survival, that was just the warm-up. The real fight started when I stepped into the business world, armed with nothing but a second-hand blazer, a resume thinner than a napkin, and a fire in my gut that refused to die. My first job application was at a mid-tier real estate firm. The manager, a man with a gold watch and a smirk that screamed entitlement, barely glanced at my resume before saying, "Sweetheart, we don't hire people with your background." No explanation, no second thought, just the unspoken truth. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't a legacy. I wasn't connected. That night, I sat on the floor of my studio apartment, so small I could touch all 4 walls without standing, and let myself cry, not because I was weak, but because for the first time I understood. The world my father had warned me about. It was real, and it was brutal. But here's what he didn't count on. Every no carved a groove in my resolve. I took a job as an unpaid intern at a startup, fetching coffee and organizing files, while the real employees laughed about their trust funds over lunch. I listened, I learned. I stayed late, memorizing every deal, every pitch, every handshake. When they finally let me speak in a client meeting, my voice shook, but my numbers didn't. I had spent nights studying market trends on a library computer, and that knowledge, that was mine. No one could take it from me. Then came the day I pitched my first independent deal, a tiny rundown property no one else wanted. The banker, a gray-haired man who reeked of cigar smoke, chuckled and said, "Little girl, this isn't Monopoly." I didn't flinch. I pulled out my spreadsheet, every expense, every projected profit, every risk mitigated, and I said, "No, sir, it's business. I'm not living until you see it my way." He didn't say yes that day, or the next. But on the third visit, he slid the contract across the table and muttered, "You're a pain in my ass. But fine, prove me wrong." That was my first lesson in power. Persistence isn't just knocking on doors, it's kicking them down when they won't open. Every rejection taught me something. The client who hung up on me, I learned to refine my pitch. The investor who called me naive, I studied his portfolio and came back with a counteroffer he couldn't refuse. The nights I went to bed hungry, they reminded me why I started, because no one hands you an empire. You take it piece by bloody piece. So if you're sitting there right now, staring at your own stack of no's, I need you to hear me. Those aren't failures, they're the bricks of your foundation. The world will tell you where you don't belong. Let it. Then go build a damn throne in the place they said you'd never reach. My father thought humiliation would break me. Instead, it forged me. And your struggles? They're doing the same for you. Now get up. The next no is just one step closer to the yes that changes everything. The day the world saw what he never could. I'll never forget the weight of that contract in my hands. The first real proof that I wasn't who my father said I was. It was a rainy Tuesday in downtown Chicago, the kind of day where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you, but the air inside that conference room was electric. The ink was still wet on the deal that would launch my first company, a boutique consulting firm for emerging real estate investors. The very industry my father had dominated for decades. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neither was the fact that the man sitting across from me, the CEO of a mid-tier development firm, had initially laughed when I walked in. "You're her?" he'd said, glancing at my business card like it was a joke. But by the end of that meeting, he wasn't laughing. He was signing. The moment his pen hit the paper, something inside me shifted. It wasn't just the six-figure deal. It was the look in his eyes when he realized I wasn't some naive girl playing at business. I was the one who'd just out-negotiated his team on commission structures. I was the one who'd spotted the flaw in their expansion plan, the one who'd offered a solution so sharp it left them silent. And when he slid that contract toward me, he said four words that burned brighter than any paycheck. "Your father must be proud." I smiled. Oh, he had no idea. I walked out of that building into the cold Chicago rain, but I didn't feel the drops. I felt the fire, because for every door slammed in my face, every investor who'd hung up on me, every relative who'd whispered, "I told you so," this was my answer. My father had said I'd never close a deal without his name. He'd said I'd beg for his help within a year. But there I was, 3 years later, holding a contract that would change everything. And the best part, I'd done it without a single dollar of his money, without a single connection from his world. Just me, my grit, and the stubborn refusal to let his version of my story be the only one told. Now, I'm not telling you this to brag. I'm telling you because I need you to feel this moment with me. That first win, whether it's a signed contract, a promoted post that goes viral, or even just the day you finally believe in yourself, it's sacred. It's the crack in the dam. It's the proof that the voices in your head, or worse, the ones in your life that say you can't, are liars. But here's the truth. They won't tell you that first win isn't the finish line. It's the spark. The real work starts after, when you take that momentum and build something even bigger. When you let that doubt fuel you instead of freeze you. So tell me, what's your first win going to be? The deal you're terrified to pitch? The business you're too scared to launch? The dream you've been told is unrealistic. I dare you to chase it, not because it'll be easy, but because the version of you on the other side of that victory, she's the one who builds empires. And trust me, when you get there, the people who doubted you will hear your name. They'll just be too late to take credit for it. Here's your script for Chapter 07. Crafted to the exact voice profile and narrative demands. You think that first win would silence them? Oh no. The moment I stepped into that boardroom as the youngest and only woman at the table, the real war began. The industry didn't just doubt me, it laughed. Men twice my age would lean back in their chairs, smirking, as I presented my numbers. Numbers I'd bled for, stayed up nights perfecting. One even had the audacity to say, "Sweetheart, why don't you let the adults handle this?" right in front of a client. I didn't flinch. I locked eyes with that client, slid my projections across the table, and said, "Sir, the adults are the ones who just lost you a 20% ROI. I'm here to double it." He signed with me that day. But the disrespect, it never stopped. It just got more creative. They'd undercut my offers, whisper to investors that I was daddy's little girl playing CEO, even when my father had long since written me off. At networking events, I'd hear the murmurs, "She's too emotional for this business," as if ambition and passion were liabilities instead of the very fire that kept me going. Once, a competitor tried to sabotage a deal by spreading rumors I was financially unstable. So I did what I do best. I turned their weapons into my armor. I invited that same competitor to a public conda, pulled up my real financials on a screen for the whole room to see, and said, "If this is unstable, gentlemen, I'd hate to see what you call success." The applause, that was my revenge. But here's the truth. No one tells you every no, every sneer, every closed door isn't just a test, it's fuel. When a banker told me my loan request was cute, I went home and drafted 3 more pitches. When a mentor warned me I'd burn out before 30, I built a team so strong we outlasted his entire firm. They wanted me to crawl back to my father. I built a skyscraper in his shadow instead. And every time they tried to remind me of my place, I made sure the place was higher. So tell me, what's the last thing someone said you couldn't do? Because I'm willing to bet that's exactly where your empire starts. The world will always have a reason to doubt you. Let it. Then prove them wrong so spectacularly, they'll have to rewrite their rules just to explain you. There's a moment in every empire's birth where the ground beneath you trembles, not from external forces, but from the sheer weight of your own decision. Mine came on a sleepless Tuesday night, 3 years into building my first company, when I stared at the spreadsheets until my vision blurred. The numbers weren't just numbers, they were a cliff's edge. On one side, the safety of what I'd already built, a profitable boutique firm, respected clients, a name that no longer carried my father's shadow. On the other, the abyss of expansion, a high-rise development in a market that had laughed me out of rooms, a loan that would swallow my savings whole, and the very real possibility that I'd lose everything I'd clawed from the dirt. I remember the way my hands shook as I hovered over the send button on the loan application. Not from fear. No, by then, fear was an old friend, but from the electric charge of knowing. Knowing that this was the leap that separated dreamers from doers. The bank's terms were brutal: personal collateral, a repayment schedule that assumed I'd succeed, and interest rates that felt like a dare. My accountant, a man who'd seen me cry over rejected permits and celebrated with me when I closed my first seven-figure deal, looked me dead in the eye and said, "You don't have to do this. You're already winning." And not when every no from my past still echoed in my ears, daring me to prove them wrong. The pressure wasn't just financial, it was the weight of every doubter who'd ever sneered. Little girl playing business. It was the ghost of my father's voice, whispering that I'd fold under the strain. It was the sleepless nights where I'd wake up gasping, convinced I'd miscalculated, that the market would crash, that I'd end up back at square one, humiliated, broken, proven right by the very people who'd bet against me. But here's the truth about leaps of faith. They're never just about the landing, they're about the seconds in the air, when your heart is in your throat and you realize this is what it means to be alive. Not safe, not comfortable. Alive. I signed the papers the next morning, and just like that, I was all in. No parachute, no plan B, just the raw, terrifying thrill of building something no one thought I could. That project, it became the cornerstone of my empire. The loan I feared would drown me, paid off in half the time. But the real victory wasn't the money or the property. It was the moment I looked in the mirror and recognized the woman staring back, not as someone who'd defied her father, but as someone who'd finally outgrown the need to. So tell me, what's the cliff's edge you're standing on? What's the loan you haven't sent? The application you haven't submitted? The dream you've tucked away because the risk feels too heavy? Let me tell you something the fearful won't. The tremble in your hands isn't a warning. It's proof that you're still brave enough to try. Now send the damn email. Here's the moment everything changed. The night I won Developer of the Year, the same award my father had held for 3 consecutive decades. I stood on that stage, gripping the crystal trophy so tightly, my knuckles turned white.
The applause was deafening, but all I could hear was the echo of his voice from years before. "You don't have what it takes." The irony? The award was for a project I'd built in the same neighborhood where he'd once told me I'd fail. The judges called it visionary. He'd called me naive. I'll never forget the weight of that moment. Not just the trophy in my hands, but the realization that the industry saw me. After years of being the girl who couldn't cut it, the heiress who thought she could play businessman, I was finally undeniable. The headlines read, "A New Era in Luxury Real Estate." My name was printed beneath it. Not his, not as his daughter, as me. But here's the truth. No one tells you about success. Validation doesn't erase the doubt. Even as I smiled for photos, part of me still waited for someone to tap my shoulder and say, "We made a mistake." That's the ghost of his words. Always there, whispering that I didn't belong. Yet for the first time, I looked that ghost in the eye and said, "Watch me." The awards kept coming. Innovator under 35. Top female entrepreneur. Each one was a brick in the wall between the girl he'd dismissed and the woman I'd become. But the real victory, it wasn't the trophies. It was the day I stopped needing them to prove myself. Because here's what no one warns you about. The highest form of recognition isn't a plaque or a title. It's the moment you realize you are the one who decides your worth. So let me ask you, what's the voice in your head saying you can't do? That you're not enough, that you'll never measure up? I'm here to tell you that voice is a liar. Your legacy isn't written in the opinions of those who doubted you. It's built in the moments you choose to rise anyway. Now go. Build something so undeniable, they'll have no choice but to call it yours. The day he walked into my boardroom, I'll never forget the sound of the door opening. It was a heavy, polished oak, the kind that announces power before a word is even spoken. And there he was, my father standing in the doorway of my boardroom, his tailored suit as sharp as the words he'd once used to cut me down. The air shifted. My team didn't know who he was, but I did. I felt the weight of every late night, every rejection, every moment I clutched my phone, willing myself not to call him for help. And now here he stood in my space under my name. My fingers tightened around the pen in my hand. For a second I was 18 again, hearing him say, "You'll never make it without me." But then I looked up and saw the reflection of my own empire in the glass behind him. The skyline outside wasn't his. The deals on the table weren't his. The respect in the room, mine. A fire burned in my chest, but it wasn't just anger. It was pride, the kind that only comes from proving someone wrong when they never believed in you. I watched as his eyes scanned the room, taking in the details, the awards on the wall, the team hanging on my every word, the city sprawled beneath us like a kingdom I'd built brick by brick. His jaw clenched. I knew that look. It was the same one he'd given me when I'd first told him I was starting my own business. "You don't have what it takes." But now the silence between us wasn't defeat. It was a reckoning. I didn't gloat. I didn't stop the meeting to acknowledge him. I simply turned back to my team and said, "Let's move to the next proposal," because that's the thing about true power. It doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. And in that moment, I realized something deeper than vindication. I wasn't just proving something to him. I was proving it to the girl I'd been, the one who trembled at his words, who'd wondered if she'd ever be enough. Here's what I need you to understand. This is what happens when you take the pain someone gave you and turn it into fuel. This is what it looks like when you refuse to let their doubt become your destiny. Maybe you've had your own version of my father, someone who made you feel small, who told you to stay in your place, but what if that place was never yours to begin with? What if the only permission you ever needed was the fire inside you, waiting to burn brighter than their skepticism? So ask yourself, what would it look like if you built the life they said you couldn't? Not for them, for you. Because the sweetest victory isn't just in winning, it's in realizing you never needed their approval to begin with. Now go, build something so undeniable, they won't just see it, they'll have to stand in it. Just like he did. There was a moment in that boardroom, after the contracts were signed, after the applause faded, when the weight of everything crashed over me like a wave. My father sat there, his fingers tracing the edge of the mahogany table, the one with my company's logo etched into the grain. His eyes, the same ones that had once looked at me with cold dismissal, now flickered with something unreadable. Not pride, not yet, but something raw, something that made my chest tighten. He cleared his throat, that familiar sound that used to silence rooms when I was a child. "You did this," he said, his voice rough, like the words had been dragged up from somewhere deep. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't even a full admission. But it was the first time he'd ever acknowledged me, not as his daughter who needed his guidance, but as a force in my own right. And that, more than any deal I'd ever closed, was the victory I hadn't dared to hope for. But here's the truth. Standing there watching him struggle to reconcile the woman in front of him with the girl he'd written off years ago, I felt the ghost of that 18-year-old's humiliation rise up in me. The one who had trembled when he called her weak. the one who had spent nights wondering if he was right.
And in that moment, I had to choose. Would I let the past poison this, or would I let it go? I chose to breathe, to remember that his words had once been my fire, not my chains. And when he finally met my eyes, really met them for the first time in years, I saw the flicker of regret, not for cutting me off, but for ever doubting what I could build from the ashes of his rejection. This isn't just about proving someone wrong, it's about proving to yourself that you're capable of more than their limitations. Maybe your father is a boss who said you'd never lead, a partner who said you'd never thrive, or even your own voice whispering you're not enough. But what if the greatest revenge isn't their acknowledgement? It's your own peace. What if forgiveness isn't about them at all, but about freeing yourself to rise higher? So I ask you, who told you that you wouldn't make it? And what will you build to show them, and more importantly, yourself, that they were wrong? The legacy you leave isn't just in the empire. It's in the grace with which you rebuild. Now go and build yours. Here's the raw truth about resilience. It isn't just about surviving the storm, it's about learning to dance in the rain while the world expects you to drown. When my father told me I'd never succeed without his money, he didn't just doubt my abilities. He planted a seed of defiance in me. And that seed grew into something far stronger than his wealth ever could. The first lesson I learned: rejection is the best fuel. Every no from investors, every door slammed in my face, every whisper that I was just a spoiled girl playing business, I collected them like kindling. And when the fire finally burned, it wasn't just for me, it was for every person who'd ever been told they weren't enough. I remember the night my first deal fell through. I was 22, sitting on the floor of a tiny apartment I could barely afford, staring at a contract with a red denied stamped across it. My hands shook, not from fear but from rage, because in that moment I realized something critical. My father's money wasn't my power. My refusal to accept his version of my story was. So I got up, rewrote the proposal, and walked into another meeting the next day, and the next, and the next, until denied turned into let's talk. Here's what no one tells you about building something from nothing. The greatest battles aren't fought in boardrooms. They're fought in the quiet hours when your confidence wavers. There were nights I questioned everything. Was I really cut out for this? Was my father right? But then I'd remember the look on his face when he first saw my name on that building, the silence that followed when he realized I'd done it without him. That memory became my armor. Resilience isn't a trait you're born with. It's a muscle you build one failure at a time. And believing in yourself, that's not arrogance, it's survival. When the world tells you to shrink, your only job is to take up more space. Not for revenge, not for approval, but because the legacy you're building isn't just for you. It's for the person who comes after you. The one who'll look at your story and think, if she could, then maybe I can too. So here's my question for you. What's the narrative you've been told about yourself that you're still letting define you? Is it a parent's doubt? A society's limitation? A past failure? Today I'm asking you to burn it. Not because it's easy, but because the fire is where legends are forged. Your empire starts with a single stubborn belief. I will not be what they expected. Now go build something that makes them regret ever underestimating you. Legacy isn't just about what you leave behind. It's about what you set in motion. When my father told me I'd never succeed without his money, he wasn't just doubting my abilities. He was defining legacy in the only way he knew how. Through wealth, through power, through a name carved into marble. But I've learned that true legacy isn't built on what you own. It's built on what you ignite. It's the fire you pass on, the belief you instill in others, the proof that resilience isn't just survival, it's creation. I used to think legacy was something reserved for the privileged, the anointed, the ones born with silver spoons and boardroom seats. But now I know better. Legacy is the quiet strength of the woman who refused to be small, the man who rebuilt after loss, the dreamer who turned no into watch me. My legacy isn't just the empire I've built, it's the hands I've pulled up with me. It's the young woman who messaged me last week, trembling with doubt, saying, "My family says I'm not enough. How do you keep going?" It's the answer I gave her, the same one I had to learn myself. You don't wait for permission to become who you're meant to be. My vision for the future isn't just about my name on a building. It's about rewriting the rules of what's possible. It's about creating systems that don't just profit, but empower, where success isn't measured by what you take, but by what you lift. I want my grandchildren to look back and see more than wealth. I want them to see a woman who turned scars into wisdom, who proved that the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's unshakable self-belief. So here's my challenge to you. What legacy are you building? Not the one others expect of you, but the one that burns inside you. When the world says stop, legacy isn't a destination. It's the courage to keep walking, even when the path isn't paved. It's the choice to turn your pain into purpose, your struggles into stepping stones. My father thought he was writing the end of my story when he cut me off, but he was only writing the first line of something far greater. Now it's your turn. What will they say about you when you're gone? Will they remember the times you played it safe, or the moments you refused to be forgotten? Start today. Build with intention. Leave a mark so bold, the doubters will have no choice but to whisper your name in awe, because legacy isn't what you're given, it's what you dare to create. Here's your powerful, emotionally charged conclusion, written to ignite resilience and leave a lasting legacy. So here I stand, no longer the girl who was told she'd never make it, but the woman who built an empire from the very words meant to destroy her. My father's rejection wasn't just a wound. It was the spark that forced me to discover who I was when no one was watching, when no one believed in me. And that's the truth I want to leave with you. Your greatest power isn't found in the approval of others, but in the fire you build from their doubt. This journey wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about proving to myself that I could rise. Every closed door, every sneer, every moment I was told I wasn't enough became the foundation of something unshakable. Resilience isn't just bouncing back, it's looking at the pieces of what broke you and deciding to build something stronger. Empowerment isn't handed to you, it's carved from the moments you refuse to stay small. And societal expectations, they're just chains, if you let them be. I didn't. I turned them into fuel. You have that same power. Right now, you might be the underdog, the overlooked, the one someone dismissed with a laugh. But history isn't written by those who play it safe. It's written by the ones who dare to rewrite their story. My legacy isn't just in the buildings that bear my name. It's in the lives I've touched, the minds I've inspired to say, "Watch me," and yours won't be either. It'll be in the courage you show when it's easier to quit, in the hands you pull up behind you, in the moments you choose to stand tall when the world tries to kneel you. So I'll ask you this, what's the story you're going to tell? Will it be the one they tried to write for you, or the one you claim with every step forward? The road won't be easy. There will be nights you question everything, days you feel invisible. But remember this, the same hands that once trembled with uncertainty are the same hands that will build your future. Start now. Not when you're ready now, because the world doesn't wait for permission, and neither should you. Your empire begins with a single defiant choice to believe in yourself when no one else will. So go, build, burn, so bright they can't look away. And when they ask how you did it, tell them the truth. You were never the underdog. You were the storm.